So they wear masks in Japan? Like, how's all that?
Yeah, so since COVID, I would say it felt like about 10-20% increase in mask wearing. But what shifted and what's really important here is that before COVID, they wore masks, but they didn't wear it because, like, oh, we're going to protect people. It was a social signal that I am sick. So I wear a mask because I am sick. It's a social signal to give space, stay away, interact with less, blah, 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 blah. What COVID did is it made everybody sick, could be sick, potentially sick, so everybody wear a mask. And that was where it took a semi-decent, semi-logical idea, I think, and turned it into a very control-oriented, scary thing that was not based in science or functional.
And it also created like a culture of like subservience.
For sure.
Where it's like, hey, put your mask on. We don't want to see you, you know, like, and you even watch like some of these like reality TV shows. Like, I mean, not now so much, but like in 2022, 21, you know, you'd see like the Vanderpump Rules and like all the tell-all specials or 90 Day Fiance, and you see the camera crew and and all the production staff had masks on, but all the cast members just had no masks.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's super wild when you.
Or the waiters had masks on, but you didn't, and I'm like, oh, it's like literal. It's like literally becoming a status symbol.
Yeah, dude, in a negative way. And it's weird because Japan doesn't really need help being subservient, I would say. And that goes to the point that I said earlier around the quality there, because what Japan has done so well is they're master craftsmen and they're phenomenal rule followers. And I have so much respect and love for Japan, but I could never live there. One, because I wouldn't be accepted because I'm white, but two, because like, if you go to an empty street in the middle of the night and you have like 3 people next to you and there's no cars coming anywhere, they still stop and wait at the stop sign. And that shit drove me so insane because it's a really good metaphor for how they think in society. And that's why they have great crafts, because people do follow things to the T and it makes really high quality, but fuck that for me.
So you think, okay, would you qualify Japan as an ethno-state?
How do you define ethno-state?
Like, you know, only one race. Like,
yeah.
One race is the dominant race, and like,
yeah.
if you are another race in the dominant race, you are kind of a second-class citizen.
Yeah, a lot of my friends who have spent years in Japan have married Japanese women. They're always treated with the utmost respect, so polite, so kind, they are never welcomed into society.
Explain, what do you mean?
It's just you're always an outsider. Like, I have friends who've lived there for 7 years, speak fluent Japanese. Nobody could tell from audio that it was a white person speaking, but they're not from Japan. And a lot of Japanese Americans struggle with this as well when they go back. Like, it's a very insular, very much we are different. So when I worked in pharma, Japan, you have to do separate studies in Japan because the Japanese government will not pay for a study done on white people or on mixed race people because they think they're genetically different. And they're a very isolated gene.
That's kind of crazy. And it's also crazy how everybody complains about Israel being an ethno-state.
Yeah.
When all of Asia and all of the rest of the Middle East, and all of Africa, well, minus South Africa, is an ethno-state.
Yeah, I think in the U.S., we have such a strange view with race, and when you start to travel outside the United States, you realize that, like, and I just had Razib Khan on my podcast, who's a geneticist, and broke down all the different genes and how similar we are and how different we are in different gene pools and stuff. But it does feel like culturally we're so oriented on race, and yet of any country I've traveled to, we seem to be the less outwardly, day-to-day human interaction racist, which is fascinating because, like, Spanish people will call black people the word that we shall not say, I guess, and then don't
the word
give a
that
fuck
only
about
black
it.
people are allowed to
Exactly,
say. Yes,
yes.
yeah.
Spanish people call them all day. Every other country will say that word all fucking day. They don't give a shit. Like, here we don't do it generally. And I thought nobody did it. And then I learned like, one of my friends, she was telling me her dad would use it actually derogatorily, and I was like, oh shit, okay, I didn't know that existed because of the culture I grew up in. I didn't grow up with anybody.
Well, even
using
going
it
to soccer
derogatorily.
games in Europe, like, you want to talk about racism, go to a soccer game in Europe and you will see actual racism. Like, you'll see like people making monkey noises with like the African like taunting the African soccer players. Like, it is insane.
Dude, you go ask any of your Asian friends, especially anybody that's not first or second generation but straight Asian. It's like, what's the best Asian? They will have an answer for you. And what's wild is they won't always say that their ethnicity is the best Asian. It's wild. It's like, you're not going to put yourself first.
That is kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
And Razib says, like, a lot of countries are racist. We are racial. And so, like, we assume Russia is like us. They think like us. But really, Russia's a lot closer to Asian than they are to white people. They're just light-skinned Asians.
Well, yeah, and also a big portion of Russia is in Asia.
For sure.
And that's
it literally, like, it's technically separate continents. But if you look at how east it is, it's full on. You look at the architecture.
No, Russia spans 2 continents. There is.
Are you talking about, like, this, like Europe in Russia?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There's a European part of Russia, and there's also an Asian part. Yeah, so there is that. Russia actually does span 2 continents. Another kind of crazy circumstance. Did you listen to the Tucker Carlson podcast with like Lex Friedman?
No, I haven't listened to that yet.
I was like an hour and a half in, and it was interesting because he talks about like, oh my God, the streets in Russia are so clean. They have the best subways. They got the like, they have real food at the grocery store, and they have like, there's no crime on the streets in like Moscow or St. Petersburg, right? And then like your Jon Stewarts and your pundits at CNN and your like American intelligence operatives and generally the American people will say, well, that's kind of the trade-off for living in a dictatorship, right? In some cases, but at the same time, like, if a country like Russia, that we look down upon and see as like a totalitarian dictatorship in a horrible place, is able to have all these things, we're the greatest country in the world. Why aren't we having this too?
Yeah, so I have a theory on this, like very, very big one. It's like kind of my whole like kind of like reason for being. But even before getting to that though, like I saw that in Japan as well, and they're not a dictatorship. Like the dictatorship thing I think is not true. It's funny because when people go to Europe, they always say like, oh, you'll lose weight in Europe, like you can eat so much cleaner, like the food's so much cleaner. But like they are being attacked by the same things that we are. If you go and eat shitty food at the grocery store, you'll still be sick, And it's funny because if we go to like seed oils in Japan, they literally label seed oils. There's non-edible seed oils, which is like what we eat here. There's edible seed oils, which basically means they're cold pressing. So it's not oxidizing and heating up the oils to make them rancid before you eat them. So it's like they literally label it like edible seed oils or non-edible seed oils, which is super fascinating. And even if you go to a Japanese grocery store here, they'll write it in English. Like you can see at the Asahi Imports here, it'll be like the ingredient will be edible seed oil because there's a difference.
It's also crazy how in America they've passed laws exempting food producers from disclosing whether or not they have GMOs or seed oils in the food.
Yeah, a lot of our food stuff is pretty wild, man. And I think a lot of it comes down to like the influence of advertising in media. So if you think about you go back to 1942, this guy, Henry Wace, he was the founder of Time, Inc., Fortune magazine. He went to FDR, and they basically did a deal that allowed for advertising to be taken out of your profits, not out of your revenue. So before, it was not considered an expense on your taxes. So advertising was just something that you had to pay for out of profits. We then, from then on, advertising became something that was considered R&D. So it was a part of your expense. And so I was just thinking about this on the way over here. Like the impact that has had is insane, and I have a bunch of thoughts on that. But the thing I was just thinking about is what it really did is we subsidize all these companies to make shittier products because they can stand behind millions of dollars of advertising that they get to write off and still have a profit. So they don't have to worry about the quality of the product that will do the sale for them. They get to actually save on taxes by spending, hiring 40,000 marketers to do market research to think about what flavors will impact us, to think about how we can control the media through advertising, through this like propaganda method that we just legalized. And the way that was realized was over 10 years, the amount of yearly spend on advertising increased by $100 billion per year in today's terms, which is fucking nuts. Over 10 years, by like 1952, it was over $100 billion a year in today's terms. So what does that mean? Like, what does that imply? Like, that basically means that people, like we have a secondary customer of media. That secondary customer are the big brands who spend money on advertising. And like, we saw this a lot during CNN, blah, 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 brought to you by Pfizer. But it's happening at the podcast level too. Like as soon as you get to a certain point, as long as this is our monetization system for media, like we will never have a not propagandized system. And that's why I think our food is killing us. That's why I think we have really bad products, is because we don't let the product do the work. They spend tons of money or subsidize essentially to do that.
Well, yes, and then when you call out this system and do it in a way that's eloquent and logically sound, you get labeled a conspiracy theorist and a threat to democracy, and I think this is what RFK Jr. is having to struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been having to struggle with it. It's so funny because even before he ran for president, like the pitch I do to my clients is we will like basically tell the brands to fuck off if they try to influence like what you say or have a problem with one of your guests. We'll just find you a new brand. Like that's our job. We're trying to create a moat between the advertiser and the podcaster. The only person I've ever actually had to do that because of is RFK, and this is pre-COVID. Like this is 2018. He was so
censored,
stigmatized by the brands at that point that it was like, no, you cannot touch that person. If anything, he's been less stigmatized now. Like he's way more popular now.
Well,
you
he's
can touch
actually
him
getting
more
a
now.
lot more. He's actually, I think, doing more mainstream media
Yeah.
and getting more of a platform on mainstream and alternative media than I think any other candidate.
Yeah. Can we switch off those terms real quick? Because like we are the mainstream, they are the geriatric. I'm gonna Michael
legacy,
Malice
how
said
about
that.
legacy
Legacy's fine.
media?
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. We are like this is becoming mainstream.
Yeah. Like Joe Rogan is mainstream.
Yes. And I was talking with I brought this up with Alex Stein like a while ago, but I don't really talk to him as much because he's blown up so much and done so much stuff that I haven't really seen him in like a year. But Alex Rose and I are friends.
Okay.
And we've talked about this like a couple times, where it's just like, both of us were considered like fringe people or outsiders or conspiracy theorists or all these things, right? And right now our purpose is like, hey man, we are criticizing and hitting on establishment talking points.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, with the way society is progressing, within the next 10 years, if we keep going in this direction, and we keep following our trajectory in the way that we're meant to follow it, we will be the mainstream. We will be the establishment. Like establishment conservatism or establishment conservatism or establishment like, libertarianism or establishment like financial advice or whatever it is, it's going to be from people like me and Alex.
I think that's the direction we're trending, but I don't think it'll ever happen until we change the business model of media. Because as long as the customers are not the consumers, as long as the customers are the people who actually pay for it, which are the brands at this point, like they will have the say. And I am starting to see a shift in brands who are more open to free speech, more, less like on this agenda-y, but they're like kind of just sensing where the populace is.
And then they're
it's
following
like a lagging
and
metric.
then they're following it.
But at the end of the day, if it ever gets to a point where it doesn't make monetary sense for them to follow it anymore, they will have no issue shutting that down. And like I saw this when I was in a big company because they were super about the green movement until it stopped making them money to be more environmentally friendly. They're super interested in DEI until it stops making them money to be interested in DEI.
I think that what I've learned from COVID, and this has actually been a very positive thing over the past 2 years, is that the people have a lot more of a say in terms of trends and how things go than we were ever meant to believe. Because
for sure.
DEI and wokeism and all of the stuff that was being pushed onto us by these corporations is going down in flames spectacularly. Legacy media is becoming geriatric. We would have never called this geriatric media and had this, and made this an acceptable. This would never be an acceptable term. You'd never have two adults talking calmly and matter-of-factly about this in 2019.
For sure.
And as a result of everything that's happened, this is the shift. You're noticing the LA Times laying off thousands of workers. Like the Statesman is having financial difficulties. You have people from Google that went to City Hall yesterday that were like protesting about the fact that they're not going to have jobs, and they literally a bunch of workers from Google got laid off in the middle of an Austin City Council meeting.
For sure. But like this is the issue though, is like I do think we're trending that way right now, but the history of humanity is a series of centralization, decentralization, centralization, decentralization. And we're in a decentralization period. But even if we look at podcasting, we look at Spotify. As Spotify takes on more brands, they lower the CPM because it's not in the host's voice. They now, if Pfizer becomes the biggest sponsor on Spotify, do you think Rogan would have the same amount of freedom that he does today? No, they wouldn't. And like we are just building the same system. So until we build a new system where the customer is actually the consumer, it's just going to re-centralize.
Yes, this is true. But I think that with people like Rogan, they've also gotten so big that someone like Joe Rogan is bigger than Pfizer. Look, in 2021 there was a whole push to try to get Joe Rogan off of the internet.
Well, they would have to break like the charade in order to like get him, right? I was actually really nervous when Rogan was having all these people on because cancelization has actually been a very effective mechanism if you think about it for saving lives. This is a weird take, but go back to the 1960s. How did we deal with problems with people who spoke truth to power? How do we deal with them? We fucking killed them. So cancelization is just a approximation for killing. And I was like, oh shit, they can't kill Rogan, or they can't cancel Rogan. Does that put him up for like opportunity for death? Which he obviously made it through.
No, I don't think so anymore because people have the Pandora's box about that has been open. There's the octopus thing on Netflix that I started watching.
Yeah. With
that Prism software computer and that guy. What's that guy? Danny Cole.
Not familiar.
I forgot. There was a journalist that was covering this. Basically, like there was a guy who sold this Prism software to like the U.S. government. The U.S. government didn't want to pay him. Like didn't wound up reneging, or the DOJ wound up reneging on the contract, and they filed a lawsuit. And there was a reporter that was meant to cover all of this. and they wound up kind of killing the reporter, saying that it was like a suicide,
Mhm.
you know, and it got some coverage, but nothing really happened as a result of that. But back in the 90s, back in the 80s, we were still prosperous. We had a good we had a better standard of living.
Mhm.
You know, we were not as fat and as gross as we were. We didn't have COVID lockdowns. We still had the majority of Americans still believed in the American dream and and the principles of what it means to live in America. The box has gotten so open right now at this point that I don't think that like those strategies that worked in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s and the 80s, you know, in the 90s and whatever, the early 2000s, I don't think that those strategies can work anymore.
See, my so I have a private podcast feed, so I monetize through subscription, and one of the feeds for the last few years was named Jamal Khashoggi because he talked about the Saudis and was just murdered in Turkey, and everybody knows the Saudis did it, and nobody fucking cares. And then they made a movie about it called Dissident, which is made by the same guy who did the Russian doping movie that won an Emmy. What's his name? What's the guy who flies too close to the sun?
Icarus.
So it's called Icarus, right? So he literally just is like the most popular movie on Netflix, absolutely crushes, makes this movie called Dissident, which is all about the Saudis killing Jamal Khashoggi. Nobody picked it up. Not a single streaming platform would buy it. Even though they knew it would be popular, even though it got promoted on Rogan, nobody would buy it. Because who pays the fucking bills? The Saudis do.
Well,
who
yeah,
pays
because
the
we
bills?
still need cheap
Pfizer
gas.
does.
We still need cheap gas.
It's not even that. It's like, who pays the bills for the UFC? The Saudis do. It's like, even the stuff that we like, the Saudis are still involved in that, and they're awful. Like, as long as we can't sell media directly, I don't think we'll have a true, clear sense-making apparatus.
But why did the
scale.
Saudis pay the bills? Because of OPEC, because of the big oil deal, right? So when you had a guy like Donald Trump coming into office that opened up energy production in America, you know, the Saudis, while still very wealthy and still with a lot of money and still with a lot of influence, had a little bit less influence because we had more control over how we produced our own oil.
Mm-hmm.
We're not shilling for Donald Trump. I'm not voting for him. I'm voting for Kennedy. I think me and you are on the same on the same page. But
Kanye or Kennedy? I don't know which one yet.
Yeah, we're Jews for Kanye, man. That's
Hell
what
yeah,
it is.
dude.
Yeah. I think that a lot of that does kind of play into each other. Like, you know, these governments only have power because we're giving them power. And when you have these green energy deals, when you cut off oil production and you do so and you focus on this climate agenda, all you're doing at this point in time is you're just giving more power to the Saudis.
For sure, and you're changing the incentives of the people who are supposed to be leading businesses. You know, like if you look at like GM, like oriented very heavily around environmental programs, around all of the things they needed to hit to get their bonus. I forget the CEO's name. But like Elon gets shit on massively because he actually delivered like crazy and now is getting his like thing pulled back potentially, which I don't think will happen. But like it's
his burner account is hilarious though on Twitter.
What is his burner account?
Adrian Dittman or something like that.
Okay, I'll follow.
I mean, not Elon Musk. I always joke it's not Elon Musk, but it sounds exactly like Elon Musk.
Yeah. Could just be like a easy AI bot in the sound of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
But I mean, his normal account's pretty fucking funny. Speaking of Elon though, so like historically I've been relatively an Elon stan, but now that I think about it, he has amassed so much power for one person that like if he was a supervillain, this is the perfect supervillain arc. Like imagine if he just decided to like take over all the Teslas and put them on every single major food zone. So it blocked off any food transfer across America. And then he was like, and China and the whole world. Then he went in and was like, yo, I'm going to fucking launch rockets, change course, and then bomb countries. He could fully fucking do that. And nobody could stop him. Then if we do Neuralink, and then he has control of this huge media apparatus. Like, I'm still an Elon stan, but like, holy shit, we have given one person a massive amount of power.
I like Elon, but I actually agree with you. I think that Elon is somebody that you should tread with caution. I actually do think compared to other billionaires, what I like about Elon too is that most people are kind of on the same page. Everyone that likes Elon's kind of agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah. And
saying, hey, we like him, we don't fully trust him.
Yeah, and I like again, as long as he seems to have like be playing the game for the right reasons. And
I don't know. I think it's that is to be determined.
For sure, 100%. And that's what I'm worried about where the arc goes. I will say his moves thus far. Like I love his story. I've read every book that he's ever like been written about him. Like big fan, but it's like, yo, this is again just too much concentration of power at some level, and I don't want the U.S. government to come in and take it away because I don't want them to have the concentration.
Well,
of power
I don't
either.
think that they'll be able to because if this guy has the amount of power that he does, and he can do what you're doing with rockets and cutting off food and everything else, and with an apparatus as big as Twitter, I think that you're getting to a point where governments might wind up becoming irrelevant as well because of the amount of power that individuals and tech companies and tech billionaires and people who just make tech are going to have.
For sure. I do think the decentralization window we're in is actually going to be like, as long as we can keep passports and have open borders, as in we can exit the border, I think that's key, then we are going to, especially for people who have ingenuity and some amount of means, or at least just like a creative spirit and aren't completely like locked down into like tons of debt or something, like they will be able to choose realities, choose government systems that they opt into living in. And this is called network state. The biology has written a ton about, but
I think Bitcoin is also going to do a lot to kind of get rid of a lot of these it's a fundamental key to getting rid of the overarching corporate influence that major companies have on media.
Yeah, and it's also just on it's just on just having a stable, or not stable, I should not say stable, but a currency that's not deflation or not deflating.
Well,
it is deflationary, or not inflating. Sorry,
a sound currency backed by math.
Yeah,
right. And I remember I was telling you when I gave you a ride, I'm like, dude, I'll give you a discount if you pay with Bitcoin. You're like, I'm not giving you any of that shit.
Yeah, for sure, dude. No, can't. It's worth way more than cash.
It's God's money, I think, for lack of a better word. Right?
Satoshi is God.
Look. I think that God works a mistake. You can't. This is crazy territory, but I do think that, and I think that like you don't really know who God is and whatever it is, but I do know that God does work in mysterious ways, and God is an entity, and God can manifest himself, herself, itself through forms that we're not really fully aware of, and I think that that could be one manifestation of God.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very curious. Like I would say, like I've been very into crypto for 7 years now, and like I totally agree with everything that you're saying. I'm a little bit concerned about like just increasing technology capacity. Like, could we break basically the security of blockchain? I think that's like a potential
like
thing
quantum
in the next
computing
10 years.
being like a red flag. Yeah, I think that's a concern.
And so that's where that scares me a little bit. Again, it's just you can't put trust in everything. You have to be like diversified.
I also think that something like Bitcoin is a tool for improving your life. And one of the things that having Bitcoin and investing in and using it has taught me is the importance of not being greedy and being happy with what you have.
For sure. No, 100%.
And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, everybody who's in Bitcoin, who's gotten into Bitcoin now, and especially in the past, is going to have less Bitcoin than they've had. They're never gonna have. Very rarely are you gonna have more Bitcoin than you have right now.
For sure.
And that's not the worst thing in the world. It just means that wealth is gonna actually get distributed more appropriately. But like, hey, if Bitcoin gets into the hundreds, dude, I want to buy. I could buy another house. Yeah. I could buy things and have a foundation to really improve my life. Me and my girlfriend were trying to have a kid. Well, okay. I don't have to ride Bitcoin forever. Once it gets to a certain point, I could say, okay, well, like now my kid gets to go to private school for 5 years. All right, good, good. Okay, now we can like get a really nice backyard. Okay, now I can buy an RV. Now we can travel more. Now, hey man, if God wills it, like you buy a second house, you buy it in full, you can get a rental property. Mm-hmm. You can use the money from the rental property to just buy more Bitcoin every single month, no matter what the price is.
What Bitcoin does is like, because inflation is a mind virus, right? Like you look at what our government has done and just taking on massive amounts of debt. You look at 18-year-olds like myself who went into college, like, wait, debt doesn't matter. Debt doesn't matter. Debt doesn't matter. This is this thing that we're taught because our money.
So I never had any student
debt. There you
go.
But like money, like great for you, good move. But like we just didn't value money appropriately. And people who get really into Bitcoin, they start to actually value money. They stop wasting on frivolous shit because they think they're in this rat race. Because when you do have cash, when you are on the inflation mind virus, it doesn't matter because it's going to go away. It's worth less money tomorrow than it was today.
And here's the thing too, right? A company like Pfizer could overtake like something like could be the biggest brand ambassador for Spotify, and a big source of their funding, even Tesla, are due to the subsidies that they get from the government.
Yep.
How do they get those subsidies? We print that money out of thin air, in conjunction with how much you get taxed, right? With something like Bitcoin, you can't print Bitcoin out of thin air. So the companies that do become like the best companies are actually going to be the best companies based on the value that they produce. It's the actual right and correct way to do capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, capitalism is such a interesting thing, right? Because I don't think we live in a capitalist society at all.
No, we don't. That's
corporate society.
It's corporate. It's corporatism. So, but something like Bitcoin, if a widespread adoption of Bitcoin, is how you actually create capitalism and how you create a true meritocracy.
It is scary though, because I think that like I totally have that view. I've just been thinking a lot more on the path to getting there, and it is going to be volatile and scary as fuck because they're not going to put that power down easily. Like at some level, like I want Bitcoin to go to 1 million, but also for it to get to 1 million, like that is actually going to be a very scary experience.
If you don't want it to get to 1 million too quickly though, because if it gets
sure.
to 1 million too quickly, it's going to cost you $300 to buy an Apple.
Yeah.
So that's actually not a good idea. Look, it takes about 140 years for the last Bitcoin to be mined.
Yeah, it won't be during our lifetime.
Yeah, or 2021-40. So 100. It's about 116 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not going to be here by then. I hope we're not here by then.
Brian Johnson will though.
I don't know who that is.
That's the dude who like the weird dude who like takes his son's blood and like eats vegan and is like trying to not die.
Yeah, whatever. Good luck on that.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst punishment is living forever though. But well, what I was saying though is that like, it's not going to be there by then. But because of the volatility and because it's going to be a 120-year process, the volatility that's going to be presented, especially if these 4-year cycles continue holding true, you have an opportunity. There's like an unbelievable opportunity for regular people to just improve their positions in life to like tremendously.
Yeah.
Like there's an opportunity because of something like Bitcoin. A man who rides a tricycle can own a house.
For sure.
Like I ride a tricycle for a living. I could actually own a house and own property and actually become middle class, become upper middle class. Who knows? Who cares? I can live comfortably and send my kids to good schools. When I have kids, I can make sure I live in a safe neighborhood. I can make sure I have a good community around me. Like there are a lot of really amazing things that can be offered just by like being patient and holding on to this asset and just following the path and not getting distracted.
For sure. And I think, again, it's that mindset shift, though, because that's a different game. That's a lot closer to a game that our parents played, or not, sorry, the
grandparents,
before our
parents,
grandparents
and our great
the great generation played.
And we get to be the great generation
Yeah.
as a result of this, and very few people see this. And so I think that if you do see this and understand it and approach this with a level head and don't look at it as a vehicle for getting rich, but you look at it as a vehicle for ramping up your life to become better.
And I think this is true. A lot of people see online, like the Miami Bitcoin, like blah, bull market, blah, 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 blah. But the people I know who truly own and hold Bitcoin, it has shifted their mindset. And I think that is the greatest gift it has given us.
Yeah.
It is I'm now focused on my kids. I'm focused on actual value. I'm focused on things that I care about and matter versus
I sold a little bit of Bitcoin and we're going to put gutters in our house and maybe build a cold plunge. Hopefully I didn't sell a ton, but I think like installing a cold plunge in the backyard, doing stuff like that for now. And then, hey, if it gets up even higher, you're like, okay, well, like I'm going to take out a certain amount at this price to make these life improvements. And then I don't care what happens. And you have to like, I think that the bull markets, I think, are the most emotionally draining parts of the cycle than the bear markets.
Yeah, for sure. It's a heady game to play, and it's funny because I was speaking with like Ben Askren, and he basically said, and so did I forget his name, but he wrote the Bitcoin Standard. They're both like
Safety.
Yeah. They're both just like, yeah, I wish I would have sold more at the top. You know what I mean? Like even those dudes who say he literally lives in Bitcoin, breathes it, wrote the book on it. He still realizes we need real world things, we need real world goods, and like it would have been nice to have a house for that.
Yeah. How do you feel about like other cryptocurrencies?
I'm a huge NFT stan, which is like kind of a
Are you really?
Yeah, huge.
Why? Okay, why?
Because I think it'll be one of the core things to change the business model of media.
I want to hear this because I feel like all this stuff is just like, I feel like these are just like fun little collectibles and toys for like to kind of flex and use as a status symbol. I think it's just a new form of art, and it's just another way to make a financial investment is what I think right now.
That's what it is right now. There are a few protocols that are doing cool stuff like Jack Butcher with Open. It has a lot more involvement. You're actually like, and it's not like the price isn't huge, so it's not like this crazy like bull thing. It's not like a PFP, though it technically can be a PFP. But like for example, when I launched my podcast, I launched it as long form NFTs, which allowed me to sell individual segments of the podcast as what I call memes. And like people could own moments from my podcast. And that actually did a lot better financially. It wasn't crazy, but then an advertisement would at the amount of listeners I had. So if you think about it this way, imagine if you could have purchased and owned and be proven to be the sole person who actually owns the real moment that Elon Musk smoked a blunt on Joe Rogan. That would be so. But
how do you
fucking
own the
much.
Moment? Like the moment happened and you weren't there. It's like
you own like
idea.
the piece of that moment. Just like any other piece of art. Like
well, because you just got it because somebody took a picture of it. Like that's
no, you literally because like Rogan. Like imagine if Rogan was on a platform envisioning creating, and he was able to actually like people competed, bidded, and minted for that moment. and then they were able to own that video. Like that video now could only be used by them in perpetuity. They own that moment. They could have it in a collector's gallery. They could sell it to
So that means I can't go on
commercials.
YouTube and watch that video anymore. I have to own I have to buy and own the video.
Or let's say if it's on YouTube, you know, they can lease it essentially back to Rogan. He can run it, and they get a percent of the profit share of ads.
That's interesting. That's all right, but then what
And
about
so it's like
okay, wait. What about security though? Because with Bitcoin, like there's no real doubts about the security yet. You know, like like people on there's a very shared assumption and understanding that Bitcoin is very safe and secure. Like if you have multi-sig, if you have a cold card, if you have like even a ledger or Trezor, ledger not as much because of everything, but you know, as long as your phrase and everything is safe, your funds are safe.
Yeah.
With like these other cryptocurrencies that can be utilized to help make these NFTs, they haven't gotten those security protocols have not been implemented yet.
I think Ethereum is fairly safe.
No,
Like,
I think it is. Well, it is.
Vitalik hasn't got all of his Ethereum taken.
Okay, but hold up.
I think both. I think there are a lot of protocols that'll like. Fuck.
Sky, the only reason why Ethereum is safe is because you can buy it on Fidelity. But if I want to move my Ethereum, and I don't have a lot, but if I wanted to move my Ethereum to Coinbase, I have to upgrade my ledger.
Mm-hmm.
And upgrading my ledger, I have to enable the password recovery.
Yeah.
Okay, so like that's not safe.
But that's like a human thing, right? It's not a protocol-based thing. Does that make sense? Like, so like the same way Bitcoin, the safety thing, I think for a lot of these things, there's obviously protocols that you don't know who writes it. It hasn't been tested as much, but they could be equally as safe from like a protocol perspective. But you still have the human aspect of people like being retarded.
Right, but for now, as it stands right now.
And you also, there are NFTs on Bitcoin too.
Ordinals.
Yeah.
Which
There's
is such
tons
a
of them
waste
right
of
now.
block space. Which
It
is also
does,
gonna
like,
it's going to make the cost of sending a transaction,
Yeah.
sending a payment way more than the payment. The payments
I was
were.
at Bitcoin Miami and somebody was speaking and he was like, "Yo, let's just let Bitcoin be Bitcoin. Let Bitcoin be Bitcoin." I'm like, I'm all about that too, but there's a lot of people making money on it right now, so I don't.
There's miners.
I don't front them.
You know, buying some mining stocks might not be the worst thing in the world as a result of this. I do have a feeling that the like companies like Riot could potentially like explode because in a good way, really, like just go through the roof. Because, like, you know, go into the stratosphere as a result of this stuff, potentially. Or you could buy, like, a mining rig or something, potentially. I'm thinking about it. Buy, like, a small, like, mining rig for a couple $1,000s, and you can kind of benefit as a result of this and accumulate KYC for your Bitcoin. But I have to learn. That's a whole other learning process. I think for right now, with where I'm at, the goal is to stay level-headed, not – my thing for, like, bull markets is don't undertake new projects until the bear market. You know, don't undertake any new experiences until everything gets calmed down and you know, and everyone tells you that buying Bitcoin is a bad idea
dumb.
and you're an idiot and they laugh at you. And you know what? As hyped as everyone is right now about Bitcoin, last year they laughed at me. 2 years ago they really laughed at me. And then 2 years from now they're gonna laugh at me again. And that's when you just start doing that. That's when you just start expanding.
Yeah, it's interesting because like as with every like all-time high Bitcoin, like then we'll see like a drift off into the alts and stuff, and there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, but a lot of people just get scammed and lose their money. So I think that's like a very safe thought process.
I agree, and I have some alts, and I'm not gonna lie, I was getting a little tempted. There's a pedicabber that I work with, was telling me about like all the trades he's making, how much money he just made right off the bat, and I'm like, I started getting green FOMO envy, and I'm just like, yo, let me I'm driving home and I'm thinking about it, and then like prayed a little bit at night before I went to bed. You know, got like a little sitter, and I've been reading like mostly every night. I mean, there are nights when I don't, right? Mm-hmm. You know, and just to try to stay grounded and trying to get like a little more religious, more in touch with my faith, which I think is also really important to manage these things. You know, but
do you want to gamble or do you want to invest, bro? I think that's like the different thing. And gambling's fun as fuck.
Okay, I know. Let me finish what I'm saying though.
Sorry.
Then the next morning, I'm like, all right, I bought like $300 worth of Zcash.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, it's a privacy token. That might actually wind up being might wind up paying off kind of throughout this bull market, considering where we're headed. Mm-hmm. It's down like almost 90% off its all-time high. If alt season if these altcoins do start mooning, the risk reward, it seems like it's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
You're not putting that much money into it. Mm-hmm. Fine, but then after I did that, I'm like, wait a minute, dude, this is a terrible idea. Don't do this again. This is a terrible idea. I'm not messing with any altcoins. I'm not doing it. I'm going to stick to what I know. I'm going to be happy with with how my life improves. And if other people and just keep the blinders on and follow the path and be around other people who are following the same path that I am. And I think that's going to just be my strategy. going forward, and that's how I'm going to do it.
I think that's a really good strategy. But this could be the one you get lucky, though. This could be the cycle. No, but I mean, I think it's a great strategy.
I mean, I already am lucky though. We're doing this podcast together. Yeah. You know, I've had a chance to I drive a tricycle for a living. I've had. I've been featured in Fox News articles and the posts for some of my city council videos. I'm friends with Alex Stein. I've helped catch pedophiles with Alex Rosen. I've been on I've had numerous articles written about me on InfoWars. I've talked to Owen Shore. I've talked to Harrison Smith. I've done Rebels for Cause. I had the guy who wrote the Target song, Nick Natoli, come and talk to me, and then he talked to me for an hour about how I could get more visibility, complimenting all my stuff and wondering what was missing, why I wasn't getting the visibility I'm getting. They invited me to present at the Liberty Awards, and I'm looking at this stuff and I'm just wait a minute, dude, I'm actually really happy with where I'm at is actually pretty remarkable.
I think that's a healthy mindset, dude.
Do you know what I mean? So I'm trying to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah,
right?
that's the right perspective.
Yeah.
And I also think that's a true Bitcoin perspective at some level as well. It's focusing on the good stuff, focusing on fundamentals, and letting life happen.
Are you going to vote in this primary, the Democrat primary?
No.
Why not?
I don't know.
Do you? Well, okay.
I just don't. I just feel like it's all rigged. I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think voting's. I think that's a black pill that people have to.
I definitely have that black pill.
I think that
Convince
voting is
me.
more a focus group thing.
Okay.
So my thing is this, right? I live in a different county.
Mm-hmm.
I don't live in Travis County, right? I'm not going to vote in my primary. Here's my reason. I want to sign the petition to get Kennedy on the ballot.
Okay.
Okay. That's my reason.
Yeah.
All right. You live in Austin with a George Soros-backed district attorney who lets pedophiles out of jail on probation.
Tight.
Okay? And lets rapists and women beaters and all types of violent criminals out with no jail time or very, very slap on the wrist type county sentences. Okay? As someone who lives in Austin, you kind of have an obligation if you still want to be here and enjoy the things that you still enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go out to dinner are you married with your wife, right? Yeah. You want to go out to dinner with your wife without worrying about your house getting broken into. You want to be able to defend yourself from an attacker without worrying about you getting prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to park a car without worrying about somebody breaking into it. For me, I don't make any money if lawyers and doctors and real estate investors aren't going to dinner with their spouses.
Yeah, for sure.
Because of the crime or the perception of it,
yeah.
Right? So I think with all that being said, you do have an incentive to vote for a district attorney who, is not going to arrest, is not going to prosecute for smoking weed, but also if you're a pedophile, you're going to prison.
Yeah, and so tell me who the two district attorney options are. Who the options are right now?
Jose Garza and there's a guy named Jeremy Silstein.
Okay.
And I did a podcast with him.
Are they both
running in the Democrat? No.
Okay.
Silstein is not Soros funded.
Okay.
98% of his money is in state.
Okay.
Okay. You should watch the podcast I did with Jeremy and make a decision on what you want to do. And this is not about trying to get people to vote or do anything like that, right? But I think that, hey, living in Travis County, this election is probably more important than the presidential election.
Yeah, vote. Especially to impact me directly, for sure.
Yes, and when it comes to fraud and voting being rigged, voting is only rigged, my opinion, if the margin of fraud is close enough that they can get away with rigging the election.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If there's an I think that whether or not 2020 was... Do you think 2020 was stolen from Trump?
I don't know if it was at the voting scale. I definitely think, and this is a kind of a popular view, but I do think the Twitter and Facebook and Hunter Biden stuff, I think that could have swayed something.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. I think it was stolen at the media scale, and it was stolen by a small cadre of very, very, very large companies with unlimited amount of Fed funds being able to dictate a narrative to get their guy into office.
I also think COVID stole the election from Trump a lot because it gave the media the ability not to focus on him like they did in 2016, but to focus on something else that got them the same amount of clicks and views.
COVID and BLM.
Yeah.
And BLM because it got all the Bernie voters who were going to stay home to go vote Trump out of office.
And what's crazy is
But wait a minute. Hold up. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Okay. But why did this stuff get so much focus? Because Twitter and Facebook were deliberately manipulating their algorithms to inundate us with this.
I think there's that portion too, but I think a lot more people vote in kind of the geriatric media. And from 2014 to 2016, CNN's ratings doubled. They were fucking dying before Trump. Trump kind of lit it back up for them. So they talked about him nonstop. They got him through the primary. They rode his dick through the primary, and then he won. Oh shit, that's not what we wanted. But now we get to stay up people will be angry at their TV, they'll watch it, they'll be upset. And then when COVID came, it was like, for the geriatric media, they were allowed to just speak on that a lot more. Like, that's what we're going to talk about. I don't know why I keep looking over here at this bike, but that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to focus on. And people still tuned in because they needed it really bad. So like, okay, cool, we don't have to talk about Trump as much anymore.
Yes, and I think as a result of that, you created a situation where if they were to do voter fraud to get Trump out, they could get away with it because the division that was caused by his presidency and caused by how the media perceived him and everything else helped perpetuate that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with where we are, I don't think that those tools exist anymore.
I definitely think they have a massive decrease in value. I would have expected podcast at the beginning last year. I was like, oh shit, I thought we were gonna have to be 10 years before we're seeing like leaps and changes in the political parties based off podcasting. I thought with like Vivek and with Robert RFK going on these podcasts that we're gonna see a big fucking movement up and kind of disrupt the parties. And I think the parties showed that they're still in control for now.
They are. I mean, I agree. I'm gonna do my part. I'm gonna at this point I'm going to voluntarily escape from the duopoly and vote for Kennedy and tell other people to vote for Kennedy.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. And I hate when people say it's a wasted vote. It's like
not
there's no such thing as a wasted vote.
No, a wasted vote is perpetuating the same bullshit system that's making you fat, sick, depressed, and causing you to lose your purchasing power at a 10% clip every single year.
For sure.
That's a wasted vote.
Yeah. And that's generally why I don't vote. Well, I've kind of voted every single time thus far, but I've just gotten really black-pilled on it. And again, locally, I should think differently because I totally agree. Locally actually has an impact, and that's what I should be caring about more and voting more, and I should be doing more work there.
And Sky also, I don't think they have the infrastructures in place to do widespread voter fraud for local elections when, enough people just come out and say, no, we're not happy with this. Because generally speaking, like, if you were to go talk to people one-on-one on the street about what's going on with who the DA is and everything like that, no one, probably, I would say roughly through no concrete stats, but just through observation, I'd say a good 80% of people that you talk to just randomly in Austin don't think like letting violent criminals out, on PR bonds is a good idea.
Definitely not. Yeah. But will they say like, should like marijuana be legal or should we have?
Yeah, but our DA is totally good. But our DA is like agreeing with not our DA, but like the guy running against Garza is like has the same view as that.
But I think the way they phrase the question though, which people will be more sympathetic to, and this is why it does get complex, is people like, do prisons work? And I think most people would say no, like they don't work. And then you go from there. It's like, oh, cool. Well, instead of reforming prison, it's like fuck prison. Like I think there's a big nihilism going on right now.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And then when you have that attitude, you just turn your community into an open air prison.
Yeah.
And that creates another set of problems.
Except for when Xi visits, then you're good.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. That which is just so insane. But you know what?
When you're talking about a dictatorship with Russia, I was like, that's all I could think about. It's like, well, we did it too for one day.
Yeah. And we did actually, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But you know what? Twitter 1.0 would not have been as visible. But there's newer Twitter, and people see things a lot more, and it does get information out. And I think that as a result of information coming out, you're going to see a shift in the political landscape. I do also think that the establishment is less scared of Trump and can contain Trump and use him to fulfill their end goal, which is another reason why I think that Trump probably wins this election.
Yeah, I feel like he I don't think he was expecting to win the first one. I think that he came in like pretty strong on some strong ideals. I wouldn't say he went like the full Obama route, like completely went away from his ideals at all, but I do think he won't be as effective as his like base wanted him to be on the first go.
This is true. I mean, you also have to deal with Congress, and you have a government, and it kind of showed the effectiveness and how great our government is because you showed how checks and balances work. Mm-hmm. Even with Biden and this Republican Congress, like, you're also seeing, like, I mean, because Biden right now, this is a horrible presidency, right? Regardless of whether you stand politically, like a geriatric who's clearly got dementia, that doesn't know which way is up and has obviously been cutting corrupt deals for like 50-plus years, and you have a geriatric Congress that has gotten hundreds of millions of dollars from insider trading, and then complaining about Donald Trump being corrupt, which I'm sure he is corrupt, right? But I'm like, it's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, but it's like they're okay with their own corruption. You know?
Yes, yeah. But I do think that, like, with all that being said, right? You have a group of people that go to Davos every year, and we're putting this in the simplest terms, and they use crisis after crisis to create a new world order in which they have complete control over everything, and you have zero control over anything, right? I think there's only one way that they can get away with that they can do something like this.
Yeah.
You want to know what that is?
What?
A cyber attack.
Yeah.
Okay?
We're leave the world behind right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
a cyber attack. And I think that the stuff that's being primed on the internet about like the stuff that's being primed on the internet and what we're being fed on Twitter, especially with all like the fake Nazi Groyper bot accounts.
Yeah.
It's priming us for that narrative. Oh, a group of far right, like neo Nazis are going to take over the country.
Yeah.
And I could see that kind of coming into fruition. I don't think it happens now under Biden. I think something like this would be more likely to happen under Trump, because then they get to blame this entire the alternative media. They get to blame populism. They get to blame conservative ideals. They get to blame American patriotism on this, and then they could say, look at what these ideals did. They destroyed. We can't eat now. People are fighting with each other on the street. Like, look at what happened to America. You really want future countries and governments to be like America? Look at America right now.
Yeah.
You know, I could see that happening, and I see Donald Trump as the perfect person to be the fall guy.
The scapegoat for that.
He is, dude. Have you ever seen Donald Trump's crypto wallet?
No.
This guy named Will Clementi, I've said this on multiple episodes, shared a screenshot of like the crypto card, like what's in his crypto wallet. It's all high yield DeFi shit coins, not secured properly at all.
Dude, that's awesome.
Okay. You know, he's soft in his tone about Bitcoin, but he's still like doesn't understand. He doesn't understand this at all.
Mm-hmm.
The only one who understands this is Kennedy. The only Republican who understood this. Well, Vivek understood it, but the only Republican that actually had a chance and a proven track record at governing effectively was DeSantis that understood this. You know, and also he was the best at managing and he was phenomenal at managing disasters. Say what you will about him. And then you had the Trump apparatus just single-handedly just destroyed him.
Dude, he got so destroyed.
Him.
That was wild, bro. I had friends working for his team, and I was just like, oh,
I had some people that I met on Twitter, and I'm just like, dude, well, they also fucked up with how they communicated.
Yeah,
they like tried to
repeat. He needed to go on podcasts. Like, he needed to be out there speaking. Like,
and they totally fucked that up. He
Yeah.
shat the bed on this.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder whether his consultants were actually looking out for him. And it also makes you want. Well, also look, dude, you're trying to manage the state of Florida, so you're at this point.
You have a
he's
job.
Probably saying, okay, I'm going to trust my guys to do and I'm going to do what they tell me because I got to manage Florida.
Yeah. I think what you're saying, like, it all like checks out, making sense, and I think it's definitely of the fold of infinite reality as a potential one. And I really don't want it to be, but it does seem like a direction we're trending. Also, what the fuck happened last week with AT&T going down too?
Oh, and then Coinbase was down too for like a day,
bro.
but that happens in every bull market.
But like, no, AT&T went down. Like, no cell service for AT&T people for like 6 waking hours last week. Like, that was wild.
Had AT&T, and it was
yeah, it was nuts. And like, boom, blip, nobody gives a fuck, moved on. And that feels like it's those little things that make me like kind of like get me a little bit more amped. Like, oh shit, are they training us for something? You know, it's
Did you see the Project Veritas video with James O'Keefe on a blind date with like one of Biden's like heads of cybersecurity?
No.
He went on a blind date and all he did was put on Clark Kent glasses, pretending to meet this guy on Grindr or something like that. You know?
It was James O'Keefe himself?
Yes.
Damn, bro.
And the guy just like spilled the beans and just said everything to
God.
James O'Keefe, not realizing that he was talking to James O'Keefe. And I'm like, dude, you're in charge. You're one of the top people in charge of cybersecurity in the United States, and this is what you're and you see no problems just opening up about a whole bunch of stuff that you should not be opening up to just because like you're trying to pound some dude's asshole after the night's over.
Dude, this is the security problem. Is like we can have complex protocols, but it's always a human problem. Like, at the end of the day, it's wild. Get a few drinks in somebody and not so secure.
It makes it very painfully obvious that this is the disaster that everybody needs to be kind of looking for. And you also have a multitude of these distractions, and I think Israel and Palestine is being used to a T. And you have a lot of people, like, even in this like freedom movement, right? All of a sudden now, like, the cool thing to do is to kind of like hate Jews. The cool thing to do is to blame Jews, to blame Israel for everything. And I'm just like, oh, wait a minute, like, hey, if we scapegoat these people that have been
scapegoated throughout all of history.
Yeah, every
just
time
throw them up
get,
again.
Every time things get really, really, really bad, the Jews always wind up getting scapegoated. Yeah. And it's really hard to believe that like Jewish people were like in charge of all these things, because if that were the case, the world would have gotten better after they have been massively exterminated. Yeah. But it never really happened.
Yeah, it's sad, dude. It's really tragic, and it sucks. Like, in my mind, whenever we're trying to be told to hate our neighbor, that's where we're being controlled. And that's where, like, my heuristic for orienting on propaganda or reality is, like, if I'm basically being told or coerced to hate somebody and hitting me at deep emotional levels, it's like, this is not incentivized for us, for humans. Like, even Jews, like, so I just had this guy, Razib Khan, who's a crazy geneticist on my podcast, and he basically has a huge blog post, and I don't want to fuck up the details, but he just did genome like historical view on people like Jewish Arabs, Muslim Arabs, Christian Arabs, and like how similar the genes are. And it's like we are fighting our brothers and sisters.
Yes, this is true. And another thing too is that if you want accountability for what happened during COVID, you know, attacking Jews doesn't create that accountability. You know, Dr. Fauci loves this.
Yeah.
Right. He gets to walk scot-free when that happens.
Yeah.
Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates love this. There's none of that. You know.
Yeah. As long as we hate each other, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
that's kind of how that's the view that I have about this thing. Right.
I think Caesar said.
I'm not worried about like pogroms coming to America or getting attacked because I worship God differently or any of that stuff. Like that's not a concern to me, right? I mean, it's a slightly higher concern, but like the concern was at 0 now out of 100. Now the concern's like 5 out of 100.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is
like,
probably high.
Higher, but it
depends on the timeline.
Yeah, it's really low. Maybe 2 out of 100, right? It's not very high for me, right? It's very low. But if you're proud of who you are, if you're choosing to, if you develop a stronger faith in God and this is how you're born to worship God, and you can't be proud of who you are, right? A, you lose your spiritual connectedness, which loses your ability to make things and fight this tyrannical apparatus, right? And B, you censor yourself, right? Which also loses your ability to create and do things effectively. And C, if you decide that you're going to still be true to who you are, you might get less of a reach in alternative media if they buy into this crap, and then your reach will just become lower as a result. That's a concern. I think it should get talked about and spoken about.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And I do think, like Caesar said, divide and conquer, keep divided, keep conquered. And I feel like that's just what consistently is happening. And we focus on all these things that don't impact us, like even me not voting in the local election when I could be voting on something that impacts us. I'm focused very much on things that I have no control over.
And also people love to engage with farmers, especially when the economy's bad and everyone's dealing with inflation, and very few people have the financial maturity that we were kind of discussing. And I'm not even close to being there. I'm doing my best, and I'm like trying to be humble about everything, right? You have people that'll cater to like groypers online just because they want more views and more clicks, and all of a sudden now you're seeing accounts that you never thought were like this that are perpetuating this bullshit that you didn't think that they would ever need to like back in the day you would think, oh man, like when they call people Nazis or anti-Semites or this and that or racist, it's a gaslighting technique to undermine the truth getting out. But then the people that were doing such a good job of perpetuating the truth are now adopting all those things that the media was accusing us of, just so that they can engage with farmers.
It's because they're the children of the algorithm, right? Like the new things that are being built were being built on the algorithm. So they're not saying anything. Where just like people who have a problem with Mr. Beast, I think he seems like a cool dude. Anybody who can lock yourself in a fucking barrel for 7 days underground, I have mad respect for. But at the same time, people are like, something's off with him. Something's off with him. It's like he's a child of the algorithm. He's pure algorithm. That's all he's representing. And it sucks when you start to play that game, when you just focus on growth and you don't have a North Star. But the other option is then nobody hears you.
Yeah, which is why I think it's so important to develop a foundation where you don't need, this is a bonus, this is fun.
Yeah.
Like I'm happy, no matter what happens, I'm still happy to ride a tricycle for a living.
Yeah. For sure.
I still have a really loving girlfriend that I'm going to have a family with. I still have my friends. I still have my family. Like I still have things that make me, I'm still physically capable. I still like myself. Right? And I think that's...
start with that one.
Yeah.
Focus on liking yourself.
That's the most important thing to... really develop, like there's no money in being a content creator. Honestly, like sometimes I feel like me being super creative is almost a curse because I have this urge gnawing at me to always have to make something constantly. And I'm like, man, sometimes I give rides, right? And I see people going to conventions and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, it would be really nice to just drink old fashions and smoke cigars outside and like, take your cigarette breaks and be totally happy with that. Or like,
it gets boring as fuck though. And I do think like it's really important to stay true.
Well, I don't want to do that now, right? But I'm just saying like, to be asleep at the wheel, like there is like, sometimes I do envy these people that are asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, for sure.
And you could never go back to that now that you've kind of seen things for what they are.
Yeah.
But, it is like, it's a gift and it could also be a curse. And it's one of those things where like you have this thing that you've been given where you have a constant urge to have to make things no matter what. And the only way I can ever fulfill this gift that's been given to me and not make it a curse is to have a good foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Dune, the guy Paul in Dune, his name is Usul, and that means like the foundation, the pillar.
It's a big deal, dude. It's really important.
Yeah.
All right. How do we get a hold of you?
like find my shit. So okay, so
find your shit, Sky King.
yeah, so my podcast is called Sky King's Mental Playground. It's skmp.supercast.com. The reason why I have gone the private feed route, even though I don't think we're going to beat Facebook with Substack, is because I'm trying to deassociate growth in views with paying for sense making. So I want to have a relationship with the consumer. It's $12 a month. If you like what I say, basically interview a bunch of people and I do solo casts on art, propaganda, and media. I do want to commend you though for staying true to being an artist, because it is very easy to get caught up in this propagandist nature. And like the way I delineate between the two, because a lot of famous art is propaganda. So Picasso is a very good example of this, is when Picasso painted Guernica, he did it as a retaliation against the Spanish government because they bombed their own people. And Guernica was a testament to that. When he became a propagandist, is you'll see videos of him online making a rooster really quick and signing it and just selling it for fucking cash because he just sold out. And you see people do that consistently. And I think it's very important for the human spirit to continue to create art. And what art is the end of your human potential. It is speaking without knowing where you're going. It's letting yourself build something beautiful for the sake of its creation. And so I want to create a system that allows people to monetize their art by doing that.
Dude, that is really well said. And that encapsulates how I kind of feel in a way that I never really was able to encapsulate. So, dude, thank you for coming on, man.
Of course, bro.
Wait, what's your social media? Get all that out there, too.
Yeah, so Instagram's I am a Sky King. Twitter is Consumer Sky.